the COVID pandemic had a huge impact on how we think about retirement. Many women were forced to retire earlier than they were ready to, while other women took the pandemic as an opportunity to retire. While millions of us stopped working during the pandemic, far more than usual, an estimated 1.5 million retirees have re-entered the U.S. labor force. Some people returned for financial reasons. Others returned for more flexible schedule or remote work, and some because they were antsy and felt like they were wasting their knowledge and their skills. The pandemic created an opportunity for a shift in perspective when it came to retirement. A great many of us reflected on our lifestyle, on our values and our priorities, and what we really wanted out of life. And women started considering retirement plans that aligned better with these newfound perspectives on work and leisure and overall well-being. The COVID-19 pandemic just brought a seismic shift to how we perceive retirement. And today, we're diving deep with a remarkable guest, Allison Wood. Allison is a therapist who ran a thriving practice and underwent a transformation because of the COVID lockdown. In this candid interview, Allison shares how unexpected circumstances can lead to remarkable shifts. While the world was in lockdown, she seized the opportunity to recalibrate her life. She slowed down, put her health front and center, and she embarked on a journey of introspection that ultimately led to semi-retirement and launching her passion business. So without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Allison Wood. Welcome to Retire Your Limits, the podcast for women who are ready to rewrite the rule books and redefine what it means to retire. I'm your host, Gayla Byer, nurse practitioner turned wellness coach for retiring women. Now, planning this next chapter of our lives can be overwhelming. At least I know it was for me. This podcast is about putting you first, challenging the norms, and unlocking what's possible for you as you step into this new era of retirement. So, ready to retire your limits? Let's dive in. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to speak with you today because I think you have a really interesting story about transitioning into a new phase of your life because of the pandemic. So
Yes.
in a way, making lemonade out of lemons, so to speak. And I think that you're not alone. I think there are a lot of women who have reframed how they think about retiring as they move into this next chapter. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you were before the pandemic. Tell us what you were doing.
So I'm a trauma therapist. I live up in Ottawa, Canada. And for the pandemic, I was running a very busy psychotherapy and neurofeedback clinic and working a lot, probably way more than I should have, working on the weekends, working late days. It was very, very busy. The growth was really quite intense. So we were responding to just a very quickly growing clinic, and it was very difficult and stressful. Yeah.
When you were working in the clinic, did you understand that you were super busy and stressed? Tell me about your awareness around that.
Yeah, I would say I was pretty disconnected. I think that I was just on autopilot. I was working a lot. I wasn't realizing the impact of it. I remember going to a party and getting phone calls on a Saturday night at 9:00 and my friend saying, and being like, oh, this isn't normal. People don't work this much normally. But I just was so caught up, I didn't even notice. And I wasn't aware of my health. I'd gained quite a lot of weight. And just overall wasn't feeling well, wasn't sleeping well, a lot of things. But I wasn't really thinking about why.
Yeah. So you weren't eating well, you weren't sleeping very well. Tell me about your activity level. Did you get out and move before the pandemic much or?
I had always been someone who exercised. I had exercised a lot my whole life, but I had completely stopped at that point. I wasn't moving at all. I was sitting all day because I'm a trauma therapist. So I would sit all day and I wasn't really moving. I remember recording my steps and it being like 2,000 steps a day. And that was just going to the bathroom. Like, like I wasn't going anywhere. And so I really needed to start moving. And I was getting sore. I was getting sore knees and sore hips and a lot of physical problems, probably from not moving.
Yeah, I can relate. Before I had decided to make some changes in my life, I just had no clue that I didn't feel well. I was so
Right.
focused on my patients, on my family, and everything outside of myself that there just wasn't any time. So I totally get that. And I think so many women are in the same position where they're just externally focused, busy with their lives, not really even aware of how kind of crappy they feel. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Tell me how the pandemic affected you.
So probably the biggest change is that the clinic closed because we couldn't have direct contact. And because we did neurofeedback and psychotherapy, the neurofeedback piece where you're literally like working on people's brains, that stopped completely. And so there was a therapy piece that was still remaining if people wanted to do virtual. So a few clients were interested in doing that. So I was off for 3 full months, but I was working a little bit, maybe 5, 6, maybe up to 8 hours a week with clients that wanted to do virtual sessions. And of course, I had my children older, so I still had kids that were relatively young. And so they were home from school. So I was home with them. I became a teacher. And so I was helping them and I was working a little bit. And I started also addressing my health a little bit. I hired a physiotherapist. He did everything virtually. He helped me to work on some of the pain I had and strengthen areas of my body that probably needed help. And I started exercising. I started eating healthier. It was actually, even though I know it was a really difficult time for a lot of people, in my experience, it was an awakening.
So can you remember when you first started having this awakening? Does anything come to mind when you think about what kind of sparked that?
I think I just started noticing that I had more energy and I was more creative and I wasn't just watching TV whenever I had a break. I was actually like doing creative things. And I noticed that I wanted to be around my family because I would come home so tired from work. And I'm really an introvert and I was with people all day. So I would come home to recharge and I have a little den and I would just come in my den and I would just turn my TV on. All of a sudden, I started wanting to be around my family and wanting to exercise and wanting to make healthy meals. And so when I noticed that, it was like, something's going on here. Wait a minute. These hours are really getting to me. They're really impacting me.
So you had free time. What prompted you to kind of start thinking, I'm thinking I might want to take care of myself, engage with my family more? Do you remember what triggered?
I think, it was interesting having conversations with clients about their experience of the pandemic and them being home. And so we were all talking about it. We were all talking about like, what are you thinking and what are you doing and how are you using this time? And, it was sort of like an opportunity for some people, not everyone. But, for some people, it was an opportunity to reflect. And so there was a lot of conversations about that. And so I think when you're talking about that several hours a week, it does make you much more introspective and more aware. And honestly, for me, I realized at that time that TV was only an escape. When I had the time and the energy, that wasn't what I was choosing to do. It was only what I would do to just close the world out. So when I didn't want to close the world out anymore, I didn't want to watch TV.
So you had this time to focus on you. Tell me a little bit more about what that looked like for you.
So I just started exercising every day. We got a pool that summer because it was so hot. And so every day I would try to swim, bike, and walk. I would try to do a little bit of each. And with the help of the physiotherapist, I really learned biking would be better for me because I was a bit out of line, like out of alignment from sitting so much. And so I started biking more and walking a little bit. And then, started to think about what I was putting in my body, looking at the family, the diet, what we were eating, trying to make some changes there. And just overall journaling, reading, just really a lot of introspection.
What did you learn about yourself during this time?
I think I learned that I thrive in variability, that when I have a variety of things that I'm investing energy in, I'm happier than when I have one thing I'm investing in. So if I'm doing a little bit of exercise and I'm making some healthy meals and I'm looking up fun recipes and I'm learning more about my health, and then I'm reading about self-improvement, and then I'm reading a novel too, and then I'm spending time with the kids, and then I'm seeing a few clients. Like, I just thrive with having a lot of different things that I do in my day. And I think that was when I started to see the difference of how much more creativity I had, how much more energy I had when I was doing different things. Like, I was doing quite a bit, but they were different things and it was stimulating.
Yeah.
So I think it was a good time to really learn that about myself.
Interesting. So having that free time gave you the opportunity to get in touch with your deeper, authentic self and discover what you really thrive with. And what you discovered you thrive with is variability. Oh, wow. Yeah. So at some point then, I think you had to go back.
Then we had to go back to work. But you know what? I came back with some really clear boundaries and I really knew that I had to cut back. So I came back with ideas of what I wouldn't do anymore because, as a therapist and just a therapist, that's one thing. But here I was also a CEO of this really big clinic, right? The good part about being the owner is that you get to decide, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to hand over these responsibilities to this person and I'm going to hand over these responsibilities to this person. And everyone had gone through some type of self-awareness or experience or awakening during the pandemic. It was actually something people were talking about changes they wanted to make. And so the conversation was accessible. People were wanting to talk about that. They were interested in how you had evolved.
So when you came to this realization that you wanted to retire, tell me what happened next.
So I really believe a lot in manifestation and imagery, and I use that a lot in my life. And usually when I have a transitional period in my life, I will really create an idea of what I want, and I won't worry about the outcome. I won't worry about how it's going to happen. I will just start sending it out there. So it was an opportunity for me to start praying and really saying, I'm ready. I'm open. I'm ready. And it just so happened that soon after that, we had an opportunity to sell the clinic. So I feel like, I don't know, did I manifest that? I don't know. Maybe I did. But an opportunity, regardless, I was open and the opportunity presented itself.
Tell me about your experience with manifesting.
I still remember sitting on my floor in my bedroom and really feeling like I was ready to close this chapter. The neurofeedback piece was really big. I had brought technology to Canada that had never been here before, and people loved it and they responded really well to it. And the clinic grew very fast. I think it was 4 times its size in 4 years. And so, but I felt like I had done my part. And I remember sitting there on the floor and saying, done it. I've brought it here. I've trained the people how to do it. I'm ready to go. And it was so clear. And every cell agreed. There was no doubt. There was no resistance. It was just a knowing. And I feel like at that point, that's when my openness to whatever was going to happen next really shifted. And I was just like, all right.
What did happen next?
So we sold the clinic, and I decided that I would spend the time that I was staying there while we were doing all this negotiation and all of that to just stop taking clients and just see the people that I had seen for a long time that I knew really well. They were more on maintenance, and to just slowly decrease my hours. And eventually, when I left, to just work a day and a half a week and just do that for as long as I wanted. And eventually, it would maybe only be a half day, would not necessarily completely retire, but just take a very small caseload, have balance. And so that was my goal. So that's really what happened.
And then, so what I know about you is you ended up deciding to start a post-retirement passion business.
Yeah.
So tell me how that came about.
Interestingly enough, during COVID, I also had this idea that so many women were struggling with weight loss, and the traditional ways that they were trying to lose weight weren't really working for them. It wasn't working for me. And so I decided during COVID that I was going to be my own human experiment. You know, I had a ton of training in psychological approaches. I knew a lot about the brain. I'd been working in neuroscience at that point for probably about 7 years. And so I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to hack my brain. I'm going to figure out how to lose weight. So there was quite a bit of reflection and things happening then, but it didn't really kick into gear until I left, which was May 2022. And then I had an opportunity to really figure out what worked for me to lose the weight and make some big lifestyle changes. And I recorded everything I did because I knew from COVID, I remember even telling someone during COVID, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to teach it to other women. So there was an awareness back there somewhere. I'd forgotten I even did that. I was remembering that just a couple weeks ago. And so the whole time I was being my human experiment, I was recording what I was doing. And so it just organically ended up being a program. And then because I had people ask me what I did, I ended up deciding to make a passion project out of it. Yeah. So that's where I am now. I never would have imagined, but that's where I am now.
Yeah, yes. I'm so curious about kind of transition from retiring from your full-time role or semi-retiring.
Yeah.
And then creating a passion career after you retire. My experience is, and time will tell because we have no data, that a lot of women are moving in this direction where they're finding passion projects or passion jobs, passion careers that they love to do, and will maybe continue to do those even beyond a traditional retirement age. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think work has changed so much. I think a lot of people are looking to their work for their passion and their interest. It's almost like it's their hobby too. It's their love too. And I feel like in definitely in the younger generations, they're driven by that passion. Like finding their passion is really important to them. They already know that. But most of us did careers and maybe didn't think as much about our passion. I feel very fortunate. I've always had a job I've really, really, really loved and felt passionate about. But I knew I was unique in that. And so I really didn't think there would be anything else for me. Like I had done my thing and I was tired and I just wanted to work a day and a half and just, keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, so we've caught up with you now to the point where you've decided that you want to do something different. You want to work part-time. How did you come up with your new gig?
So I think it was just a passion project. And it was something I was working on personally. And then I think after I had people asking me what I did that helped me lose the weight and make these lifestyle changes, then it just made sense to organically to just start telling people about that. And people saying, can you teach me what you did? And it just fell into place. And I also felt it was something that I had never learned anywhere else. I felt like it was something other people needed to know about. And then sure enough, within a few weeks, formulated itself into a plan and of maybe I could do this.
Did you have any limiting beliefs or any doubts when you came up with this idea to follow this passion that you had about helping people experience what you experienced as you lost this weight and made this transformation for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any doubts or limiting beliefs that were blocking you from doing that?
I would say that I live by a philosophy of put the gremlin in the back seat. Like, I believe that we all have limiting beliefs. I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful you are. Everybody has that little voice that's like, really? Are you sure? And for me, I hear that voice and I just put it in the back seat. I do not let that be my driver, because if I let that be my driver, I'd be driven by fear and I would limit myself and I wouldn't try new things. And so for me, I can have those voices. And I must say, this was a new one for me. So there were probably a few more of those gremlins this time around than, say, with my career where I'd sort of done the same thing for a long time and it came really naturally and I just trusted myself. This is a little different and I have to put myself out there in a different way. So definitely the voice was there, but whether I listened to it was the key. And I choose not to. I choose to let it, keep talking, go in the back seat because I'm driving this and my wise self is driving the car.
Yeah. I loved it when you told me, we talked previously just a little bit about the gremlins in the back seat. And I just love that story because, or that metaphor, I guess, because, that's what happens. But it sounds like you had a few more, like maybe you needed a van or a minibus or something for these gremlins. But at any rate, they were all in the back. And that's where they
all in the back. And I'm just like, just keep talking, but I'm not listening to you and I'm not letting you drive. You can stay back there because I'm going to do this anyway. I'm allowed to have doubts. I'm allowed to have fear, but I will not let it run my life. Yeah.
That's great advice. So compared to how you were when you were working and when you owned your practice, to where you are now. Kind of compare that for me and tell me where you're at now.
I think I'm in a really good place. I feel really balanced. I feel I'm doing a lot of different things. I have free time on days where I need to have a rest. I take a rest or I book the next day off. I really listen to my body. I listen to, wherever I feel like I need to slow down or maybe ramp up a little, like something interesting I want to pursue, I'll just follow that. I feel like I'm so much more balanced, I think, than I was before, so much more aware of how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. And so it feels really good. Like it's a really good place to be in.
Good. Yeah. So when you mention this self-awareness that you have or being more aware, how do you practice that in your life now? Is that something you just automatically have, or do you practice that to keep that awareness?
I think it's something I've always worked really hard on, but I feel like over the past few years when I was really busy, it was something I lost touch with. And I think it's really that inner guide, that we all have an inner guide. And I check in with that part of myself really often throughout the day. And definitely every morning, I will really try to think, okay, so what's the day ahead? What do I want this day to be like? What are some goals I'd like to achieve? So it's really being able to kind of tune in and think about what do I need? And if I feel like, for example, let's say I notice I'm a little more irritable or anxious, then I'll check in and be like, okay, what's going on? Oh, actually, I probably need a night off. Where I make no commitments. I'm home. I just chill out, hang out with my family. So I really listen to my body and I let that be my guide.
So it sounds like you really are in tune with your body, not only physically, but also your thoughts and your feelings. And you're able to monitor those and catch them when you notice you're feeling a little anxious or you're feeling tired, that you recognize it and then you're able to modify your life a little bit so that you can care for yourself. Yeah. It's not easy. It's not easy to maintain that awareness. I mean, there are so many things going on outside of us. And especially if we get busy or we have crisis come up or something happens that throws us off, it's really hard to maintain that awareness when we need it the most. Any advice on how you can do that? What do you think?
I find actually meditation has been really helpful for me because I feel like the goal of meditation is really to strengthen the observer and the observer self that's sitting at the back, the one that notices the thoughts and notices your patterns. And so I feel like the better you strengthen that part of yourself, the more you're able to be more tuned in and you can catch your stress when you're at a 1 or a 2 instead of it getting all the way to a 7. So I feel like meditation has been really key for me. I've done a lot of meditation. I've had years where I've done it more. So now I feel like I have the time to do that again. So I think that helps a lot because that helps develop the observer. It's like a muscle. If you're strengthening that muscle, then you're able to stand back and really see how you're feeling. Notice those physical sensations in your body, catch them early on, check what you need and listen and be your own best friend. But like pay attention to what your body is telling you and don't dismiss it. Listen to it and it will guide you.
I agree. Meditation, I think, is one of the most important things to help with self-awareness because it just creates enough space in between us and the thoughts and the feelings that we can make decisions about that then. Yeah. That's great. So what kind of advice or insight would you give a woman who's working full time? She's exhausted and she really wants to retire, but she doesn't have all the time that we would have when we're in lockdown to kind of explore and become more aware and determine what we really need. What advice would you give to that woman?
I would probably say to start writing. I think journaling is really impactful. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. Write a little bit about what you want. Start creating that image in your mind of what would fulfill you, how you might feel happier, what you imagine it looks like, what does it feel like. Be descriptive. Just try to really be open to that process and you'll be amazed at what starts to show up and the ideas that come to you from that deep inner wisdom. Just letting that process happen naturally and organically by a little bit of writing. I think that's what I would tell them to do.
I think so too. I agree. Journaling is a fantastic tool to use to kind of develop self-awareness, not only just by writing everything out, but then going back and looking at what you've written. You know, it's kind of like a mirror that you can see a little mirror into that deeper self. So, this has been really fun. I really appreciate you telling your story about your transformation that you've made over the course of this last few years. Tell us just a little bit more about where you're at with your new business, how people can find you and learn a little bit more about you and your weight loss program.
Yeah, so currently I'm doing one-on-one sessions. And my goal is to, in the fall, have a group program for women so it's more accessible and we can support one another as a group. And so if anyone wants to reach out and learn more about it, my website is WeiGHT, WEIGHT program.com, or they can just Google Allison Wood, 2 L's and an I, WeiGHT program, spelled WEIGHT, and they will find me. Or they can reach out and I'm happy to chat about options or help them in any way that I can.
And I'll put your website at the bottom of the
thank you.
Podcast notes. Great. Thank you so much, Allison. I really appreciate you being on the podcast with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking with you and having these discussions is really helpful. I hope it helps other people to start to think about some of these things too. So thank you.
Me too. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Allison Wood. I'd love to know in the comments, did the pandemic change the way you think about retiring? Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.